Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Book Talks with Yo. My name is Yoanna and today I'm talking about 22 books I want to read before I'm 22. So a few days ago I turned 21, so yay, I'm officially old. And I thought, why not create a list of a few books I want to read before my next birthday, so before I'm 22. And as I started writing this list, there's a few books turned into 22 books that I want to read before I'm 22, because, 22, it's pretty self-explanatory, I know, but yeah, some of them are classics, some of them are historical fiction, or, yeah, that doesn't mean that this is all that I'm going to be reading for the next 1 year, but it just means that those are some books that I want to explore soon. Or in other words, we have many books to go through, so I'm not going to go into much details about each one. I'm just going to try and be very brief, as otherwise we would be here until my next birthday. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video and talk about books. So first on my list is The Catcher in the Rye, and this is a book that I intentionally know just a little about because I don't want to go into it knowing too much. But what I do know is that this book takes place around the 1950s and it is narrated by this young man, I think his name is Holden, and this book takes place around between, I think it spans across 2 days between his fall term, the end of the school fall term, and Christmas. And I think that he's being treated in a special mental health hospital or a sanatorium, but I'm not really sure about the details. And I know that this happens right after he's been expelled from school. And yeah, as I said, I am being very vague intentionally because I don't want to go into it knowing too much. And I know that this is a classic, I know that many people have analyzed it, so I just want to go into it without having read anything else about it so I can have my own experience with this book. Next up we have The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini. And I've been recommended this book by so many of my friends and I've read so many reviews about it that it is finally time to read it. And I actually bought this physical copy, I think it was last autumn on my book shopping trip. So yeah, I have a physical copy, so it's time to read it now. And I know that it spans across multiple decades, from the 1960s to the early 2000s, and it is set both in Afghanistan and the United States. And at the center of this story, we have the unlikely friendship of this wealthy boy and the son of his father's servant. And this book explores friendships and explores family relationships, love, and overall the devastating history of that time period at that place. And this is a time I don't know much about, but I do want to know more. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about much else from the story because I don't want to spoil myself or you guys, so I'll just let you know what I think once I finally read it. Next up we have Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And this is said to be one of the best books overall and one of the greatest works of Virginia Woolf. So I honestly didn't really need to even read the synopsis because I love the previous things that I've read by Virginia Woolf and I want to explore her more. But let me tell you a bit about this book. So it spans across just 1 day. It's the whole story is just 1 day, takes place in 1 day, in the life of this woman, Clarissa Doway, who is preparing a party that she is hosting that evening. And she is busy with her last minute preparations. She is looking around the house, preparing last minute stuff and walking across her London neighborhood, arranging some other stuff about the party. And as she's doing this, she gets some flashes of people from the past and things that happened in the past, which make her re-examine the choices that had brought her to where she is now and make her also think about the idea of growing old. And as I said, I don't need to know more. I am already hooked and I'm sure that Virginia Woolf has crafted another masterpiece. The next book on my list is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. And this is another book I don't know much about, but I've heard people talk about it, I've seen it recommended to many places, and my interest is piqued, definitely. It tells the stories of 12 different women, most of them are Black British women, and they talk about their past, their friends, their families, their lovers, And I am being vague intentionally because I don't wanna know more about this. This is enough to make me want to explore it, as it's kind of different than what I usually read, but this makes me want to explore it even more. And I was actually talking about this book a few days ago with a friend of mine, which further spiked my interest to just get this book and read it. Next up is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. And this is, well, surprise, another book that I know almost next to nothing about, but I feel like this is the right way to go into Murakami's work. And I know that this is a story about two young people finding themselves and finding love. And I think one of the main characters' name is Toru, and he is challenged with the struggles of isolation and loneliness in college. And we also have Naoko, who is this beautiful and ambitious young woman. And yeah, this is what I know, but I have heard that this is an exceptional book, and that if you haven't read Haruki Murakami, this is one of the best books to start with. And since I haven't yet, I want to start with this one. Oh, and it is also set in Japan, which is a very interesting setting, because I'm always interested to learn more about this different culture. Next is Animal Farm by George Orwell. So this year, for one of my literature modules, I've read and analyzed 1984. And I was actually really impressed by this book. I loved the book, I loved his writing style, and I loved his use of metaphors in the narrative. It was just brilliant for me. I really liked it. So naturally, I also want to read his other book, which is Animal Farm. And I know that in this book we have those farm animals who are sick of being mistreated and not respected by people, and they set out to create this paradise of justice, equality, and I've heard some very interesting things about this book, and I actually found a research paper while I was doing my research for my essay on 1984, and in this research paper they compared both books. They compared Animal Farm and 1984 in certain aspects, and ever since I read this article I've been so interested in reading this book. Next up is a book that I've mentioned many times on my channel, but I still haven't read, which I know, is a surprise for everyone, and this is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book talks about the First World War in 1917, and it follows the stories of 4 lovers, and it's actually told by Aphrodite, the goddess of love, as she's telling this story of those 4 people to her husband, Hephaestus, and to her lover, Ares. And she's telling this during the Second World War, I think, and she's trying to answer the question why war and love are eternally drawn to one another. And I feel like this combines everything that I love. It's historical fiction, there is some romantic story involved, and we have the Greek gods. So I think that's right up my alley. Next up we have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I wasn't sure whether it's 451 or 451, but we will go with this one. And in this dystopian world, books are on the brim of extinction, just literature is on the brim of extinction, because fireman's job is not to put out fires, but to create ones and burn books, essentially. And I don't need to know anything else. I know that I'm hooked, I know that I've been wanting to read this book for quite some time, and I know that a lot of people love it, and I feel like there is just something for everyone in this book. Next we have If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And in this story we follow Oliver, who has just come out of prison for something that he might or might not have done. I think he's been there for 10 years or 7 years or something like this, and the first person he meets is the detective who actually put him there. And this detective demands to know the truth now, after Oliver has been already in prison. I don't know what's the story behind this, but yeah, this is essentially what we get from the beginning of the story. And we learn that Oliver, a few decades ago, has been part of this group of college students who have been studying Shakespeare at an art college. And everything has been alright until one day one of the actors is found dead, and all the other students have to do their biggest acting challenge, trying to convince everyone that they are innocent. And I think that this book is considered a mystery thriller, which will be new for me, but it's a new age, it's a new me. Next one is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is another book that, see, I don't know much about. I've included in a bunch of my lists, a bunch of my TBRs, but I still have a very vague idea of the plot. But this is intentional. I don't want to know much about mysteries before going into them, and I think this one is a mystery. So what I do know is that it's set in college in New England, which, if you know, is my favorite setting. I am a sucker for books set in college or university. And I also know that there is a murder right at the beginning, there is some mystery, there is this classics professor and 6 of his students. And I also know that this book is considered to be the ultimate dark academia book. So I'm drawn to it. I want to explore it. I want to see what the buzz is about. And I included this book in I think it was my autumn TBR last year. I didn't read it, obviously. Then I included it in my 21 books I want to read in 2021. And now it's added to this list, so it is time to read it. I have no excuse but to read that one. Next up is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. And what I do know about this book is that it is set in 1930s, and we follow those two friends, George and Lenny, as they start working in a ranch, I think. And I think that the whole novel takes place in no more than 4 days, I believe, as they start working at this ranch and they meet the people there and they learn about their struggle and their loneliness, the people working at that ranch. And we also see the two friends talking about their dream of owning their own ranch, and we also see Lenny falling for the daughter-in-law of the ranch owner, I think, I think this is the idea. But I've been recommended this book by a couple of my friends for my uni course, and I've heard a couple of professors mention it as well, so I'm interested to check it out. Next up we have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And I know that I'm very late to read this book. This book has been out for ages, people have loved this book, and many people have read it in their childhood, but for some reason I've missed out on this, and I still haven't read it, but I want to watch the movie adaptation, and in order to do that, I want to read the book first, of course. And I know that it follows the story of the Marsh family and their four daughters. We have Jo, who is this frivolous tomboy who is an inspiring author as well, so I love her. We have Amy, we have Meg, who is the oldest sister, and we also have, I think it was Beth, who loves playing the piano. And we follow those 4 girls as they're growing up and they're learning more about life. And I feel like this book deals with a lot of themes that are just timeless, and it portrays lessons that people need to hear all the time. And I also know that their father is gone in the American Civil War, and their mom is looking after the girls and is trying to bring them up. And yeah, it sounds like a very charming, it sounds like a very comforting read, so I feel like this would be ideal to read now. Next is East of Eden, again by John Steinbeck. And this is another book that I don't know an awful lot about, but I've been recommended by many of my friends who know my reading taste and my special place for classics in my heart. So yeah, I want to check it out, and a sentence in the synopsis of the book that really piqued my interest was that this story follows the intertwined tales of 2 families as they are reenacting the endless myths of the fall of Adam and Eve and the rivalry between Cain and Abel. But yeah, it sounds vague. I know that I'm being vague, but I want to read it. It's been around for ages and I just want to read it and analyze it. Next up we have We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee. And what I know about this book is that we follow the lives of 14 teens who are Nisei, or this means second generation Japanese American citizens. And we follow them as their lives are turned upside down during the mass incarceration in the USA during the Second World War. And this is something I know little about. I didn't even know about this before I read this, and this is not something I'm proud of. I want to learn more about it. I want to read this book, and I want to educate myself on this question. I want to know more about. But yeah, essentially what this is a period. This was when thousands of people with Japanese ancestry were forced to leave their homes and were put in internation camps. But yeah, I think that we follow those young people. They're trying to stick together and try to come to terms with what is happening to them at this early stage of life. And I know it's a historical fiction, or it's a YA historical fiction, so I'm sure I'll like it. Next one is Rebecca. And in this one, we follow our heroine who is swept off her feet by the dashing widower Maxim and his sudden and unexpected proposal of marriage. And our heroine is really surprised. She has never expected him to do that. She has never expected something like this to happen to her, as she has a fairly ordinary life. But when she moves with him to his large, massive country estate, she finds out that her previous wife's shadow is going to be following their lives. And I have to quote something here because I just love this one from the synopsis. It says that this shadow, the shadow of his previous marriage, is going to present her with a lingering evil that threatens to destroy their marriage from beyond the grave. And this just sounds so chilling and so creepy, and I'm always here for a good gothic novel. Next one is The Dangerous Alliance by Jenneke Cohen. And this book is essentially, reviews claim that this book is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue meets Jane Austen, and that was all I needed to know. Like, I was hooked right from this sentence. I was sold out. This was all I needed to know. But a little bit about the synopsis of this book. We essentially have our heroine Victoria, who is a big fan of Jane Austen, and actually uses her novels as a blueprint for finding herself a husband. And this has actually never been one of Vicky's priorities, but after her sister flees the home of her abusive husband, Vicky has to really quickly find a husband right now in order to save the estate, the family estate, and to protect her sister. And people say that this is a very funny novel, that there are a lot of references to Jane Austen and her novels, and I love a good Jane Austen novel. And yeah, I feel like this is going to be a very quick and engaging read, so please hand this book my way. Talking about Jane Austen, next on my list is Sense and Sensibility, which is one of her novels that I still haven't read, but I do want to. And essentially in this one, we follow the stories of two sisters, Marian and Eleanor, who are complete opposites. Marian is this free-spirited, romantic, and rather naive girl who falls for the wrong guy. And on the other side, we have Eleanor, who is very clear-headed, very goal-focused, but she's also very affectionate, but she shows her love in different ways. And we also see her falling for someone. And essentially in this novel, the two sisters have to learn that sense and sensibility shouldn't exist separately and should be used together. But yeah, that was all I needed to know. I love me a good Austen novel, so this is the next one I'm going to pick up. Next up is the Illuminae Files by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. And yes, I know, this is another series that I'm really late to read, and I know that people have been talking about it for so long. But yeah, I still haven't read them, and I feel like the reason that I still haven't read them, that I've put them for so long, is that I'm not that good with science fiction, but that might just be because I've read not that many science fiction books, and most of them have been for my uni courses, so naturally I wasn't a big fan. But the media of this series, like the forum that is used, the innovative ways that this book, that the whole series is written, is really piquing my interest. So I think that my interest and my curiosity will prevail, and I'll pick up this series very soon. Or at least I'm hoping that I will. And I know that it's set in the very distant future, on this aircraft ship thingy, and there is some form of a plague that breaks out, and we have the two main characters who are trying to save themselves and save everyone. But I also think that they have broken up, or at least this is what I've heard from people talking about this book. So that sounds very intriguing. And yeah, I don't want to spoil myself. I'm very vague about the first book because I don't want to get any spoilers and ruin the experience. Because I feel like reading this series will be a very different, but in a very nice way, reading experience. Next one is Middlemarch by George Eliot. And this actually is said to be one of the greatest English novels of all time. So naturally, of course I want to read it. Of course I want to see why it is claimed to be the best one. And I think that it is set in the late 1800s. and we explore a bunch of topics of concern of that time, of the life of that time, like religion, science, self, human relations, love, and just everything that was of concern to the people at that time. And we also have a bunch of characters. We have a whole gallery of flawed but yet authentic and some even lovable characters. And I've heard many people talk about one particular character that everyone just seems to love and relate to. I think her name is Dorothea, and yeah, I just want to see why people love her, and I want to see why this is considered to be one of the best novels. Next is A Man Called Uve by Fredrik Backman. I believe that you've probably heard of his stories, even if you haven't read them, because they're just true masterpieces. And I've read 4, I think, of his books previously, 4 or 5, and I've loved all of them. They've all moved me, they've all made me so emotional, and I've probably cried on all of them, because they're just so good. But I still haven't read this one, so I'm including it on my list, and I want to explore it, because I feel like this was the first book that made his name pop up, in a way, and like many people found him from this book. So I want to see what it is about. And I know that there is this grumpy old man, Uve, who has a very strict regime, who has a very strict schedule, and a rather short fuse. But his tranquility and his way of life actually change when he finds his new neighbors. There's this family who moves next door with their 2 chatty daughters. And naturally, they form some interesting friendship. They're a very surprising friendship between a grumpy old man and chatty kids. But they form this really heartwarming friendship, and along the way we also learn the sad story behind the cranky exterior of this old man called Uve. But yeah, I'm already sure that this book is going to make me cry, as all of his books have already made me cry previously, and it's going to be a heartwarming story. Next is All the Lights We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And this book has been on my TBR for ages, literally ages. I added it before I even read my first historical fiction, but as you can see, I haven't read it yet, which, yeah, is not a surprise to anyone anymore. This is just me exposing myself. But yeah, I want to read it, and I've decided that I will finally read it at this point. Before I'm 22, I'm going to have read that book, because I think I added it when I was 15, so yeah, it's natural, it's high time I read that book. But what it is about, it's another historical fiction, and it's set in the Second World War, and we follow this blind French girl who is forced to flee. I think she lives in Paris, and she's forced to flee her home and go and live with her uncle. I'm very vague, but yeah, I know little about this. And then we have this orphan German boy, Werner, who's become a very, very good at building those essential instruments that they need. So he is essentially chosen to track down the resistance. And this book is popular because of its unique writing style, of the portrayal of a very heartwarming friendship, and those amazing characters, brilliant writing. And it's another one that I know that is going to make me cry, but I'm here for it. I'm ready for that. And last but not least is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. And this book sounds so magical and so whimsical that I'm intentionally not reading much about the synopsis, because I want to be engrossed into this world. I want to go into it knowing as little as possible. I want to read about the whimsical setting, about the magic behind this one. And yeah, I do know a few things. I know that it tells the story of this underground sanctuary for books and storytellers. I think it's called The Starless Sea. And we follow this young man, Zachary, who one day he finds in his library, his campus library, this book that is about his life and essentially his childhood. So he's very interested to discover more about this, to investigate and find his link between the book and the link between him and the book. And yeah, I feel like this is a story about the love of reading, the love of storytelling, and yeah, this is the type of books I love, and I don't need to know more about it than to know that I want to read it. So that pretty much wraps up my 22 books I want to read before I'm 22. That was a ride. Wow, that was a ride. But I really hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on my new videos. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of those 22 books and what were your thoughts on them. Thank you once more for watching, and I really hope to see you all next time. Until then, have a smiley week. Bye!